All right, everybody, we're going to go ahead and get started. This should be a somewhat pretty brief synchronous lab. This will be our last one. But today I'd like to do a few things. Number one, just go over the schedule for the rest of the labs and what to expect on those lab quizzes. And then from there, just go over a couple of the commonly missed questions on the CAT upper extremity quiz 1 that you guys had last week. And then from there, go and just take a look at the human upper extremity and trunk muscles a little bit, just to give you some of the some tips and some things that I tend to use when I'm studying those muscles to give you some guidance there. So that's the plan for this morning. So this will, as I said, this will be our last synchronous lab. But yeah, let's take a look at the schedule here. So right now, this week, we're in week 11, right there. So we're on our last synchronous lab. CAT upper body 2 is kind of what the lab was slated as, but really we're going to look more at the human muscles, the lower upper extremity human muscles, and obviously no quiz this week. So no quiz, and then next week will be asynchronous lab, but the quiz will be on the muscles of the CAT upper body, the second one of those, and I will show you in just a second exactly which muscles those are that are going to be on the quiz. So you're just to remind you of that. And then the week after that, week of November 9th, we'll have one more quiz, which is on the muscles of the human upper body, and those will be the ones we'll be talking about today. And then finally, the week of November 16th, before Thanksgiving week, the week before Thanksgiving, will be the muscle practical. Okay, and that muscle practical is worth 125 points. So it's a lot of points, which means it has a lot of opportunity to change your grade in this class. Right? It's worth more than one of the lecture exams, and in most ways, it's a very tangible. The information is tangible, right? You know what you need to know. You've seen the quizzes. You've seen most of the muscles. You've seen the quiz format for most of the muscles that you're going to be tested on. So for the most part, I think you know what you need to know. And if you put in the time and study hard for this, then I think you can do pretty well. And it can be a great booster for most people in the class. So yeah, and then we don't have the lab the last 2 weeks of class. The 15th and 16th week of the semester, we don't have lab. So we'll be done with lab after the practical completely. So yeah, so any questions on the setup there, the schedule, what we have going on moving forward? Okay. All right, and just as a reminder, I would appreciate it if those of you that don't have your cameras on could, if you're able to do that. I see quite a few of you having your cameras off as we move further along in the semester. I get it. I know. I'm hearing the same thing from all of my colleagues. But yeah, it just helps you be present. It helps me know that you're present. Helps me know that you're not just logged in and getting ready for the day or doing something else. So I would love it if you could turn your cameras on. Thank you. Okay. All right, so that's the schedule for the semester, or for the rest of the semester in lab, and then let's take a look at Canvas here. I'd like to show you a couple brief things here in Canvas. So under the modules page at the top here on the muscle lab resources, hopefully you're very familiar with this page by now, and hopefully you've spent some time here. If you haven't, you definitely should. There's some good resources here. And that would definitely help you study. Okay, so we got all these videos. So we've created these top ones are just videos of the synchronous labs. These next 4 or the next 3 are videos of Dr. Fleetstra going through the CAT muscles. Okay, so highly recommend watching all of those if you haven't yet. She is by far the master of knowing these CAT muscles. So she gives you lots of good tips, lots of good ways to study these. Okay, so highly recommend you watch all of those videos if you haven't yet. And then I have 4 videos here of going through the cadaver muscles. Okay, so highly recommend that you watch those as well. Okay, so And also this, that little link there where it says hints for visual identification of muscles. Many of you have asked me, like, do you have some tips for us? Do you have some ways that would help me study and learn these muscles? That's a document that does just that. Okay, so if you haven't accessed that document yet, then I would definitely do that. And then obviously we've got the practice anatomy lab. That's a very good resource for studying those muscles as well. Okay. All right, any questions there? Okay. All right, so I went through, oops, shoot. Let me share my screen again. I don't know why I did that. Okay. All right, so yeah, I went through the lab quiz from last week, and there was a pretty clear theme as far as which ones the class struggled with, this section in particular. And the biggest one was really the rotator cuff muscles, okay, on the scapula. And so let me just highlight a couple things there, okay? So when we're looking right here, right? So we're looking at a left posterior view of the shoulder there, left posterior view of the scapula, really. Okay, we've got a acromiotrapezius kind of covering up some of the rotator cuff muscles, right? We got it covering up both the supraspinatus and infraspinatus. But let's say that acromiotrapezius was peeled back. Okay, remember that the cat is in this position, right? So that means the spine of the scapula is perpendicular to the ground, not parallel to the ground. So the spine of the scapula would be something like this, kind of somewhere in there, probably. Okay, so that means any star that you might see up here, okay, that's clearly on the posterior side of the scapula, would have to be what muscle? Everybody throw it in the chat right now. Same time. Count of three. 3, 2, 1. Throw that muscle in the chat. Don't be swayed by your peers. Okay, everybody, come on, everybody, put it in there. Don't look at what everybody else is putting. Just put what you think it is. Okay, this is getting at the confusion that I saw in the quiz as well, for sure. So there's only one anterior rotator cuff muscle, right? Okay. How many posterior rotator cuff muscles are there? Hold your fingers up. 3, okay, and 1 anterior, okay. So there's 1 anterior, there's 3 posterior, okay. So that place I put the stars, that's got to be posterior, right? Because we're looking at the posterior side, unless we kind of get it way down here, right? This will be the other side now, right? If we can kind of get it to where it's like wrapped around, that's kind of the best we could do to get to that anterior side, okay? And there was a tricky one like this on the quiz, right? So this is now looking at the right scapula, right? So there was one where the star was right here, and then another one where that star was like right there, right? Those two were the most commonly missed ones, okay? So most of you for these stars said supraspinatus, but a lot of you put subscapularis, right? And so this would definitely be supraspinatus. Okay, so that would be supraspinatus, as well as all of these little stars I put right there. Okay, but the one that's kind of wrapping around right there, that one would be subscapularis. Okay, so it's just kind of the best you can do with a 2D image of something, right? If this was in the lab, we would have a pin stuck underneath the scapula, and you could clearly see that it was underneath the scapula, and that would be what this one would be, right? But in this case, the best we can do is just kind of get that star wrapped around to the anterior side as much as possible, And so that's what I just want you to be aware of and be ready to look for, the difference between these two muscles and where they would be starred. Okay. All right, so another question to put in the chat. I'll just, in 5 seconds, I want everybody to hit enter. That one that I said, we said there was one anterior rotator cuff muscle, right? So in 5 seconds, I want everybody to start typing that and hit send in 5 seconds, okay? Anterior rotator cuff muscle. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hit send. Boom. You guys got it. Okay, so you got that. So it's not it doesn't seem to be a confusion of which one is anterior. It's just more that it's tricky to figure out which one that star is on, right? And I get that. I totally get that. It's not easy to do this in 2D for anybody. Okay, so that's why I hope what I said right here helps you guys. Okay, does anybody need any clarification on that? Okay. All right, but that's not the only place that subscapularis was tricky. Okay, subscapularis and infraspinatus were also tricky from this view right here, right? There were questions from this exact view. Okay, so actually all 3 of the muscles, actually all 4 of the muscles listed here were ones that the class struggled a little bit with on the quiz. Okay, so when you have this view, first of all, you don't get to see this, right? During the quiz, you don't get to see that it's an anterior view of the left shoulder, right? So how in the world can you get your orientation? Well, I think the best is by looking at those guys right there. Those are very unique, right? Those are distinct. There's no other muscle that we have that looks like that we're trying to identify. Okay, so if you can see those like ridges, they're serrated. They're really supposed to be like sawtooth-like structures that look like this, right? Then we know we got to be it. Then we're on that anterior view, looking at serratus ventralis. Okay, don't call it serratus anterior in the cat, right? You will get marked off for if you do that. Okay, serratus anterior in humans, serratus ventralis in the cat. Okay, so a lot of people miss that one. Okay, but just recognize the way that muscle looks, and that's your best bet to identify the muscle itself, but then also to recognize that you're on the anterior side, kind of looking up, pretty much looking in the cat's armpit, right? You're looking right here, right? This is the view that we have right there. Okay, serratus anterior in me would be right here, right? But then do this with yourself right now, guys. Lift your arm up like this and grab your scapula. Okay, you can fully grab your scapula, right? Grab it hard. You can actually kind of move it around a little bit. That might help you wake up a little bit. If you push hard enough, it'll kind of hurt. But yeah, you can totally grab it, right? So with my thumb right here, I'm touching the anterior surface of my scapula, right? I'm touching the anterior surface there, and then with my index finger right here, I'm touching a little bit of the posterior surface of my scapula, right? So that's what we're talking about here or that's what we're looking at with this view of the cat. Okay, so this is where my thumb was. This is where my index finger was, right? So my thumb was touching subscapularis, right? Because that was on the anterior surface of the scapula, the side that's closer to the body. That's what we always just got to think about it that way with the scapula. Whatever side is closer to the body, that's the anterior side on the scapula. Whatever side is kind of open up to the back of the posterior is the posterior surface. Okay, so this is where my index finger was. This is where my thumb was. Okay, so any kind of stars right around in this area, obviously on the scapula, that's got to be subscapularis. And there's kind of a midline right here, something like that, right? So anything to the left of that would be subscapularis. Anything to the right of that would have to be infraspinatus. Okay, and then just know that you can see the latissimus dorsi from over here too, right? We can obviously see it from the back too, but we can see it from the anterior side here too when we look at that. Okay, and those were definitely the ones that that you guys struggled with the most, but I'm happy to answer any other questions or help you clarify anything else on that. Any other questions on those upper extremity cat muscles before we move into the human muscles? Okay. All right, so let's take a look. First of all, let's go to the what the quiz for next week is on. Okay, so that's going to be starting here on page 14. Okay, so all of the muscles here on the cat's lateral arm and posterior forearm. Okay, there's lots of muscles in there, right? So all those forearm muscles, I went through how to my tips on how to memorize those last time. Okay, last synchronous lab. And then here on page 15 is the other group of muscles. These are going to be the medial arm and the anterior forearm muscles. Okay, so those will all be on next week's quiz as well. Okay, so then we'll come back to those human muscles, but let me just go to the table here real quick. Yeah, I don't know if it's possible for me to make that right side up for you guys. Nope. Yeah, so it's going to be sideways. but for next week's quiz, so it's those. So let me just circle the ones that it's going to be on. Okay, so it's on these guys: anterior brachial muscles, posterior brachial muscles, anterior antebrachium, which is the forearm, and posterior antebrachium. Yeah, so those are the ones. Yeah, so it's 1, 2, 3, 5, 9, and 12. So there's 12 muscles there for next week. Okay. All right. Any questions on that? Okay, so let's take a look at these human upper extremity muscles. These are the muscles that are going to be on the last quiz. Okay, let me just go back to the schedule here real quick. So next week is those muscles of the cat upper body 2. That's the ones I just told you it's going to be on next week. And then the week after that, our last quiz before the practical is the muscles of the human upper body. Okay, but that also includes the abdominal and trunk muscles. Okay, so let me show you. Yeah, we'll spend a little time walking through those. Okay, now the nice part is you've already studied all of these muscles in lecture. Okay, so you have a little bit of a head start. Obviously, it's a little bit different when you have to identify them on the cadavers, but at least you have a good head start on these muscles. Okay, so we're starting on page 18 here. Oops. So we're starting on page 18. Okay, and so a couple big differences between the cat and the human are these deltoid and trapezius muscles, right? The deltoid muscle in the human is one muscle. In the cat, it was the clavo-acromio-spino-deltoid, right? Same thing with trapezius. It was the clavo-acromio-spino-trapezius. In humans, it's just one, okay? So deltoid, big shoulder muscle here. Trapezius is the most superficial muscle on the back. And so most views where you want to see the muscles underneath trapezius, this trapezius will be peeled back. Okay, so that's just something to be aware of for when you're getting a view of that part of the body, is that trapezius is going to be peeled back, and then you're going to have some muscles underneath that you have to identify. Okay, so now in this case, this is different than the cat, right? The human's not up like this. The human is in anatomical position. Okay, so what that means is the spine of the scapula is like right here now. Okay, so right below that will be infraspinatus, right? If we peel back the trapezius and it's out of the way, then right above that spine of the scapula will be supraspinatus. Okay, it's not labeled here because the trapezius is in the way. Okay, and then we have our third posterior rotator cuff muscle there, which is teres minor. Okay, and then the triceps, it's called triceps because it's got 3 heads, but we can only see 2 in the cadaver. Okay, so we have the lateral head, which is always going to be over here. And then we have the long head, which is always going to be over there. Okay, and the long head actually comes all the way up and crosses the shoulder muscle. So I don't have the best angle of it there, but it crosses the shoulder. Okay, there's the medial head as well, but we can't see it. I wouldn't be expected to identify it. Okay, we can see, obviously we can see latissimus dorsi. In humans, it's pretty much this whole thing. It's huge. Okay, it's pretty much all of this in humans. Okay, you can see, I guess the dividing line would be kind of right there instead, because we can see a little bit of serratus anterior wrapping around the corner there. Okay, from this view, the posterior view, we can see some of the posterior forearm muscles. Okay, a lot of people struggled on the exam on Friday with those. There were 2 or 3 questions on the forearm muscles. Okay, the one thing I tried to be clear of, especially in the review session, was that all the muscles on the medial side or the ulnar side, those are adductors, right? All the muscles on the radial side or the lateral side are abductors. You obviously don't have to know the actions for the practical or for these lab quizzes, but yeah, just knowing the names of these. So all the ones on the posterior side, which is what we see here because we're looking at the back of a human that's in anatomical position, the ones on the posterior side are all have extensor in the name. Okay, so extensor carpi radialis longus, that's the four-word one. Extensor digitorum in the middle, and then extensor carpi ulnaris. Okay, so most of if the cadaver's in anatomical position like it is there, then we know that this is the thumb side, right? And this is the pinky side, or the ulna side, and the radial side. Okay, so that's your best starting point, and it's just about the order of things, guys. So we got one muscle here, one muscle here, and one muscle here, right? So the one that's closest to the radius side is the radialis, closest to the ulna side is the ulnaris, and then we have the extensor digitorum in the middle. Okay, so that's that one. And then if we get a little bit closer look, we can see some of the muscles underneath the trapezius, right? So it's trapezius reflected. Okay, so if you can see the rhomboids like this, then you know the trapezius has to be gone. And the rhomboids have a very different angle. Their angle is like this, okay? Whereas the trapezius doesn't look like that. That's a good way to tell. And you can usually also see kind of the scapular spine kind of sticking out in a way here, okay? So we got supraspinatus on top, right? So that's all this one here, supraspinatus, and then we got the rhomboids there, okay? And then the other one that we can see here, that we couldn't see before, is levator scapulae, okay? That one has a very different angle. Pretty much going up like that, right? So levator scapulae is obviously there to elevate the scapula. Okay. Questions on any of those so far? Okay. All right, then let's look at these anterior muscles, and let's start with the trunk ones. So we have 4 abdominal muscles that you need to know. Okay, same ones you needed to know for the exam on Friday. Okay, the most superficial one is the external oblique with its fibers running this direction. Okay, so when this one contracts, it pulls you to the opposite side, right? Don't need to know that for the practical. Okay, this handout doesn't have an image of it, but if we peel that back, the one directly underneath it is internal oblique, and those fibers run the opposite direction. They run this way. Okay. And then we can see rectus abdominis, it's the big one down the middle here, okay? And then if we peel the back internal oblique, we would see one going this direction, which is transversus abdominis, right? So those are the 4 abdominal muscles that you need to know. So the key really is, because sometimes it's hard to tell if which of those obliques is pulled back. So the key really to knowing those 3 on the side is the direction of the fibers, okay? So external obliques are always going to be going this direction, internal the other way, and then transversus pretty much goes straight across like a belt around the abdomen. Okay, and let's move up into the neck muscles. We've got two neck muscles that we haven't talked about at all in class. Okay, they weren't part of what you needed to know in class, but this one is called the sternohyoid. It's named for the 2 bones that it touches. Okay, the sternum, right? And then it goes up and attaches to your hyoid bone, which is that bone that's on the outside of your larynx, your voice box, and it protects your larynx, but it also serves as a muscle attachment point so you can move up and down your throat when you're swallowing and when you're talking. Okay, so that's the sternohyoid. Sternohyoid, there's one on both sides. There's one right there and one right there. Okay, so it pretty much goes straight up and down both sides there. Okay, sternocleidomastoid. I want to have you guys feel your own sternocleidomastoid. So resist yourself. So take your left hand, put it up on your left side of your cheek, and push and kind of rotate your head to the left, and then feel right here. You can feel this muscle right above your right clavicle that pops out when you do that. That one that pops out right there. So it kind of goes up the opposite direction. It comes from your mastoid process, goes down to your clavicle and your sternum, okay? So it's called sternocleidomastoid. Those are the three muscles that are three bones that it touches. Okay, the sternum, the clavicle, and the mastoid process. Okay, so it's on both sides. We got one on both sides. It's a rotator of your neck. Okay, those are ones we hadn't talked about. Obviously, we've got pectoralis major. Be aware that pectoralis major might be peeled back, and then we have to be looking for pectoralis minor. Pectoralis minor goes from the coracoid process, right? Kind of like at this angle, right? So pectoralis minor is much smaller, but it would be looking something like that, and pectoralis major would be peeled back if that was the case. Okay, only one that would be identified right here, typically on humans, it would be the serratus anterior, and we would usually see those serrated lines there. Okay, and then let's move into the brachium, or the upper arm. So there's three elbow flexors that you need to know, and they're all right next to each other. Okay, so biceps brachii clearly has two heads here, right? We can see a dividing line between those two heads right there. Okay, and then right underneath it is brachialis. Okay, it just pretty much sits underneath biceps brachii, and sometimes we can see it on both sides of the biceps brachii. Okay, and then we have brachioradialis, which pretty much comes up right here. Okay, and so the brachioradialis and brachialis are a lot of times almost connected up here, and you'll see that in the video when I show it on the cadavers. But brachioradialis comes way down here. Okay, it's an elbow flexor that inserts all the way down towards the wrist. Okay, so those are our three elbow flexors that you need to know on the anterior side of the upper arm, and then we've got the ones on the anterior forearm that we need to know, and there's four of them. Okay, so we start on the ulna side because we're still in anatomical position, right? We're like this. So if we're starting here on the ulna side, okay, then we're going to work our way lateral. Okay, so flexor carpi ulnaris, palmaris longus is the one that just is mostly tendon, right? Flexor carpi radialis, and those are the three right in a row. And then we have this unique one up here, which is pronator teres. Okay, so that one has a unique angle of pull because it goes across, right? It's going from the medial epicondyle of the humerus, and it's going across this way, whereas the other ones are going straight down. This one goes across because when it pulls, it's going to pull you into pronation. Okay, so it's that pronator teres muscle. Okay. Yeah, so that is pretty much what I wanted you guys to study, or what I wanted to go over with you guys today. So I'm not going to do the thing where I send you into breakout rooms to force you to study. Hopefully, if you like studying with somebody and you like the partner you study with, then you can set that up on your own at this point in the semester. But any other questions that I can address related to lab or these muscles or what all this stuff is going to look like in the next few weeks? Okay. All right, guys. Well, that's all we got today. So just a quick half hour. So make sure you're studying all the way up. You know, don't just wait to study on Wednesday night for this next week. There's a lot of muscles there in the cat upper extremity, and then the week after that. And make sure you're reviewing those muscles from previous sections too, because when it comes to the practical, look at this table, guys. There's a lot of muscles, right? That's a lot of muscles to know. Okay, and a lot of different views, a lot of different angles. So you really got to dedicate some time to this. But like I said before, I think it's a very doable thing to learn and study if you put the time in, and it's a great opportunity to help out your grade with that 125 points. Okay. All right, everybody. Good to see you this morning. Hope you have a good rest of your day, and we'll see you tomorrow in class.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.